Well, thank you, RJ, for being here. I'm super excited to have you. What does RJ stand for?
Yeah, everyone asks me that. You know what? My real name is Robert. Middle name is
Okay.
Jay, Jay.
Okay.
Last name's Elijarraz. So my grandfather's Robert, my dad's Robert, and I'm Robert. And I'm not
Okay.
Robert the third because we all have different middle names. So I'm
Okay.
technically not a third, but I was the third Robert in the chain of oldest sons.
Okay.
And the day that I was born, my grandfather, was at the hospital and he was like, "We will not have another Robert. He is going to be called RJ." So I've been RJ since the moment I was, maybe even before I was born.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I went through one small period of my life in my first sobriety attempt when I was 21, 22, where I was at work and I'm like, okay, Robert is a professional name and I need to go by Robert. And I did that for a couple years and then I'm like, I'm RJ.
It
Like,
doesn't sound
like
right.
that's
Yeah.
just
You look like an RJ though. You actually do. And I've never met an RJ in my life, but like
yeah.
you seem like an RJ. That makes sense to me.
I love that. It fits. It
It
fits. And
does.
and the thing is, I'm terminally unique, and I've been terminally unique for as long as I can remember. And there was a lot of Roberts and a lot of Bobs, but I really didn't know any RJs. So
Yeah, totally. My brother is a chef. He's a really good chef and he goes by Danny and always has. And he was like the youngest sous chef at Kiowa Resort in South Carolina. And I saw something and it said Chef Daniel. And I was like, what? Daniel? Who's Daniel? Yeah. I'm like, that's Danny. It just seems so weird. And now he's back at Danny. But yeah, you're definitely, I think, like an RJ. But I can see why Robert seemed more professional. And I love what you just said about terminally unique. I listened to you on, I forget the name of the podcast, but it was great. She is maybe like a PhD, and so much of our stories are really similar in terms of us feeling like I'm smarter than the people that need 12, not smarter in a way that we're looking down on them, but it's different. And you described it really well. It's like a soup kitchen is great. We don't look down on it, but we don't need it. And that's how I felt too, right? Like it's like a homeless shelter. I don't look down on it. I think it's great, but I don't need that. And it sounds like you went through a lot of that too. And I went through years of that, which extended the length of my using, quite a bit. But before we get there, where are you from? Talk to me about where you're from and a little bit about your family dynamic growing up.
well, first I want to just comment on what you talked about because it's funny that you bring that up because yesterday somebody brought up the analogy that I've used and they were like, "Wow, man, that really just hits the point so well." And it's the best one I know of. It's not the soup kitchen. It was like AA was in my mind, my 21-year-old mind was like public transportation,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
was like it was
Okay.
it's like taking the bus. And if you grow up in California, which is where I grew up from, especially Southern California, taking public transportation, just is not the mode,
And it's
right? It's
no,
less like,
it's
and
not. It's
listen,
not the move. It sucks. I ended up having to do it, and I think you did too later, right? But I
for
didn't
sure.
want to. But that's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's just I respect that we have public transportation. I think that whoever needs to take it, like it's a means to an end. Thank God it's there. But, no thank you. I'm gonna, buy my own car, right?
Right.
And
Totally.
that's how I viewed AA and recovery, which was like
Absolutely.
AA and recovery is sort of this free service, put a couple bucks in the can, in the basket, just like the bus, you know what I mean? I'm going to go ahead and get, a good job and I'm going to find a lot of success. I'm going to
Totally.
make money and I get it. You guys need
Yeah.
this thing, but I got my own formula for this. I
Totally.
got I got the brains to figure it out.
Totally.
That was, and that's the disease of alcoholism. But I guess to kind of dovetail into what you asked, which is I'm from Southern California. I was born and raised in a little town called Westlake Village, where you came and did our podcast. That's my hometown. That's where I grew up. There's like not a single street that I don't know. And I grew up in a really great family. I mean, you couldn't have asked. I think I won the 1 in a billion genetic lottery, right? Like I could have, a nanosecond, maybe I was born in Ethiopia, right? But, somehow God, the universe, I was born into just an amazing, amazing family that was, middle upper class. We grew up in a really nice neighborhood, going to country clubs. We go to church, on the holidays, lots of extended family coming in, big holidays, little brother and sister who are twins, they're 3 years younger than me. And so, from the outside, I can't point to anything in my family that would ever be like, oh man, this is, why I stuck needles in my neck and shot speedballs, right? You couldn't have asked for just just a more amazing family. And we're all, super close today, and we all live right next to each other still here in this
Oh, you
hometown. And
do?
yeah, yeah.
So your parents are still married? There was no
No,
crazy
no, no, no. They
divorce? Okay.
No, well, they got divorced when I was 7, but
Okay.
my parents are good friends, right? So like,
God,
you
that's
know, I
so cool.
yeah, I mean, we do, family events where,
That's
mom and
awesome.
stepdad and dad and stepmom and stepkids and everybody, like we're all together and it's all pretty copacetic. So I feel like I've had some pretty good emotional role models in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
You can find faults in everybody. Nobody's perfect, but with all things considered, I feel like, I was very much the black sheep, I think, of my family. And I just fought everything and was a terribly uncomfortable kid. And I always tell this, like these stories, because I think this is so characteristic of maybe alcoholism or whatever it was, that was just my skin didn't fit right. And I knew that from a really, really young age, because I remember going to like my first times going to Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, anywhere where there was like a big amount of public, amassment of people. I was so uncomfortable that I would get physically ill. I'd like throw up. Yeah, yeah. It was just little kid RJ, like whatever, like OCD, just like like dirty, sweaty people and crowds, and I'd see other kids, in
Yeah.
those areas, just like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And I was just not that kid. I was just, for whatever reason, and that's why I also believe, and that was before my parents got divorced, right? That's, I can't point at any cataclysmic event that happened, and then I started becoming that way. I was that way since I could remember, and since I had consciousness, and my skin didn't fit right kind of out the gate. I always kind of felt like other people seem to live with a certain level of immunity or like freedom, or just we're able to let go. And from a really, really young age, I just was not able to the point where, I'd become physically ill,
That's
right? Like,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's so crazy, right? It's really weird when I talk about it.
Well, but like it's not though, because I think, and I know from listening to you, you and I have really similar viewpoints, if not the exact same viewpoint on addiction, recovery, right? All those things. Through doing my show, I've learned to be a little bit more flexible on what I believe like works. But I do still believe that the disease model of addiction is the most plausible explanation because you felt that way as a kid. And I think that too, like, I think that I was born with a certain predisposition to these various like insecurities that resulted in me turning to outside substances, right? Like, I think that we have that. So to me, it kind of makes sense that you already felt that way, that there wasn't some cataclysmic event, because I went through this, my parents' divorce was kind of traumatic, but I already felt long before that when I was like a teenager, 10, 11, 12, I always wanted to be different. I always wanted to be like the popular girls. I would change my handwriting to be like them, and nothing had happened yet. I just already felt that way. How did your school relationships look? Did you do well in school, and did you have friends in school as you go through elementary school and middle school? Like, did that anxiety present in any way in school?
I did great in school, like elementary. I really loved school. I think because it was like that level of classroom or that amount of people, and I knew everybody.
Yeah.
It's like I could be in a room of people that I know, and I'm totally comfortable.
Okay.
If I'm in a room of people I don't know, I am like, just don't like feel as comfortable, right? And so, at school, I had some best friends. I had, all that stuff. I think I was generally maybe a little bit more mischievous, but I was like always the kid that was like the Eddie Haskell. You know what I mean? Like everybody's parents loved me. I was like, seen as like the really good kid. And in the background, I generally was like kind of the like the mad scientist strategic kid that would like recruit everybody else to like do the things that were maybe the most dangerous part of the hit job that we were going to do to like, steal the other kids' marbles or like whatever, right? It was like I generally was like whatever it was, whatever the way my little brain worked was, I kind of like was hung out in the back, but I had lots of friends but I was mischievous. Like I liked to have little plots and plans and like poke holes through the fabric of the way things normally operated since I could remember. But yeah, I'd say it was, young school, great. Once I got to high schools where things, got just a little bit more odd. That's where my friend group, like we were all like very anti-drugs, right? And I was probably like the ringleader of like anti-drugs.
Really?
Like oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like hardcore, like I'm never doing drugs and, like swore with all my friends, like we're just never doing drugs. And then, one at a time at like 15 and a half, they start smoking weed. And I was like so hell bent on not doing drugs. I'm like, we're not friends anymore, right? Like we're just like, you're not cool anymore. And slowly but surely, it was just me and my best friend. And then I found out that my best friend was smoking weed behind my back
Oh shit.
and I caught him, right? And we were like, this is like blood oath, we're not doing drugs, right? And so then I was like, all right, you're out of the friend group, man. But then I found myself in a friend group of one, right? It's like just me and I'm hanging out with mom every night. I remember this is such a critical point in my story because I'm like at home probably for I don't know, a number of weeks where it's like I'm not hanging out with anybody, I'm just hanging out with mom. I'm definitely feeling left out, but I'm mad at everybody. I'm like in this weird position of not knowing what to do, but I'm getting like more and more depressed as each day goes by, like sitting at home watching TV with mom at night. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get high. And we're down in this bedroom. And do you remember Maury, the late night, Maury,
The talk show?
kind of like Jerry.
Yeah.
Like Jerry Springer.
Mm-hmm.
So we had like a Maury rerun on TV. It was probably like, 11, 12 o'clock at night. My friends milk this bong, right? So it's just like fully, it's just like thick. And they do it for me and then they hand it to me and they're like, here, you're gonna breathe this in and then you're gonna hold it, right? So I'm like, and they're like, hold it. And I'm like, holding it. And then I'm like coughing, right? And like my eyes are watering. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I was kind of scared. I remember being kind of scared because I'm like, I don't know what's about to happen right now. And I just kind of sat there for a minute. I'm like, nothing's happening. And I'm kind of in my mind like, see, but then I was still kind of scared, like something's going to creep up. And then all of a sudden, right, I'm looking and watching Maury and I don't know what they're saying. And I remember this like it was yesterday, right? First time getting high. And I'm looking at it and I don't know what they're saying. And it's like, it's like somebody's cheating on their wife. So, something like that, right? And it just sounds like womp, womp, womp. And I'm like, and I can't, and I start laughing so hard that like, I couldn't stop, right? Like I truly could not stop laughing for the life of me to the point where like the next morning, my abs hurt so bad from laughing. Tears. And then the laughing and the fact that I couldn't stop laughing was even more funny. And I just like, I couldn't stop. Right. And then they started laughing at me laughing and not being able to stop laughing. And then I somehow, wound up in the kitchen and just clearing out. Yeah. Oh man, just like give me everything. And I remember eating frozen peas. And frozen peas still to this day are so good. And I'm eating frozen peas.
Wait.
And I'm
no,
just like,
they're not. Frozen peas are not good. You're insane. Most people eat ice cream and shit.
Listen. There was no ice cream. Right. There was like healthy crap there was nothing good. Okay, there was like, looking back, like there was no like, but I just was like, I need food. and I'm eating these frozen peas, and I'm like, I'm telling you, they were so good, and I just couldn't stop eating them. And I remember like the next day, I was just like, I looked at my friends, and I'm like, why didn't you guys tell me? This is so
Oh
great.
shit.
You know,
Yeah.
like why? And it was just kind of like, well, we couldn't because you're, a stubborn dick,
Yeah.
right? So, but then at that point, right, it just became like, this is it, right? Like, why was I holding on for so long? And the same sort of veracity I had to like be the person that was going to hold strong and not doing it, all of that now was fully committed to, well, I'm going to be the very best at this now, and then you fast forward and it's like I'm kicked out of multiple high
Oh,
schools.
wait.
I've become like,
Wait. Okay. So how old are you when you smoke weed for the first time?
I think I was like almost
So
16,
in high school
15 and a half,
already.
16. Yeah.
What gets you kicked out the first? That's a pretty rapid decline. What gets you kicked out the
Oh,
first
yeah,
time,
yeah.
and how much later is it?
It's not that much later, a few months.
Okay.
Like, yeah, it was
Okay.
like, it was on,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, there was a number of events that all happened at the same time. I was the kid that like I pulled the rubber band back because I was the last person to ever, to get high. And so it's like you pull that rubber band back and you're the last one to get high. That smacks and hits real hard, right? Because you got to catch up. There's that, I think. So I'm actually a kind of a proponent that like I think that kids experimenting is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
almost feel like the kids that are like extremely like, I'm never doing that. It's almost like that rubber band gets
Totally.
super pulled back. And then
Yeah.
when it hits,
Yeah.
it always seems to be a lot harder. So that event happens. I get high for the first time. I also got my learner's permit. I got my first car. I got, you know what I mean? So there's all these new gateways that have just opened within like maybe a 90-day period, right? And my parents were divorced. And so I lived across mom's house and dad's house. And I had always had like pretty much complete autonomy, since I was a little kid. Not that like my parents didn't know what was going on, but I just had autonomy, right? Like I could just kind of come and go as I please. I could like, sneak out in the middle of the night and be running around neighborhoods and like that was never an issue, right? Like that never, and we were good kids. I think my parents trusted, like we weren't just like gone latchkey kids. My parents also didn't like get mad if we left at, midnight and, played ding dong ditch around the neighborhood. And I didn't have those kind of rules. And so now that you've got this situation where you've got two separate houses you're living across from, where you can really kind of split the difference on like, what are you actually doing, hiding from either parent, not a whole lot of rules and a whole lot of autonomy, not a lot of checks and balances. And then I get high for the first time and I get my first car. Right. So it just, at that point, it was like, I'm going to not buy just a gram of weed. I'm going to buy an ounce of weed. And, the same mind of when I was a little kid of like, how do we, poke holes in the matrix of this? How do we cheat the system? How do I like find the loophole? It was like, well, I can get all my friends high for free if I just buy enough and then sell to everybody else. And now I've become that guy. Right. And so that's what I did. Right. And, 1 ounce turns into like, a quarter pound. And all day, every day, it's like, how do I not go to school so I can sell more weed and just get high all day? And so, my first high school, which is like the normal public high school out here that everyone goes to in Westlake, it's a public school, right? So it's not like super integrated with your family. Like they call if you miss class, like things like that. But I like knew some people that worked in the office, and somehow I was able to kind of cheat the system and get them to like not mark me as truant or like not there because I give them weed. Yeah. It's like a little loophole,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so I got away with this for a while, and I was failing 100% of my classes. Like I hadn't gone to school for, I don't even know, like way too long. And everyone thought I was going to school, like my parents, right? Because I'd leave in the morning, get in my car, like, hey guys, and I would just hang out outside of school, and I would just find the different people that wanted to also skip school that day. Right. And there was always like somebody that wanted to skip school. And I think in the beginning, it's kind of like mistakes I've made in my recovery in the past where it's like, oh, I'm only going to do this for a day. Right. Like I'm only going to do this. Like I'll skip one day today. And then, the second day came and it was like the first day was so easy. And now I've missed class. There's homework. Okay, I'll just miss one more because on Monday I'll catch up. Like, that'll give me, and then a Monday comes and then it's another week and then it's another 2 weeks. And, and then all of a sudden my mom's getting a call from the school and she's like, hey, why are they telling me I have to show up at, 8 a.m. to meet with like the dean of students? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. That's weird, And, God, man, I remember this was one of the first consequences I ever had, right? This is like, I just had no consequences. This is the first consequence. I'm freaking out. I don't know how to handle it. And of course, just like out of the big book, the 12 steps, right? It's like we get tight right at the wrong moment, right? Right before right before the big date or meeting or business deal or whatever, right? And so I know tomorrow morning we've got to have this conference and mom's showing up and I haven't been to school in like weeks, right? And I know this is going to be a problem. You know what I mean? Like this is big problem. Like ours is in a lot of shit. And so what I do is I leave super early before my mom, and which is super odd. Met with some friends. I smoked like an entire blunt, like, cause I'm just get really high. Like it'll be fine. Like just be super high. Like, and I got so high that I can't speak.
Oh no.
Literally, like literally I can't talk. My mom tells this story. Like she'll tell it like, at Christmas, like at holidays, like it's a good story. And I'm walking into the school and my mom's sitting in the office already. Cause of course I left super early, but I show up to the school late. Right. And mom's in there and she can see me through the tinted windows, but I can't see her. And she knew. She'll tell you, she's like, I fucking knew you were so hot. And I like walk into the thing and I open the door and it's so bright in the office. I remember like looking at my mom and she just gave me this like almost like this death stare, right? And I like sat next to her and she's like, you're high. I know. And I'm like just looking at her. Like I can't even defend myself because God. I'm so high.
Yeah.
I can't speak. We go into this and she's like, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? And we go into this meeting and again, it was like watching Maury and you're just like, wah, 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 wah. And they're talking. I don't know what they're saying. It's not good. I know I'm in trouble.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I literally go blank. I can't say a word. I'm just sitting there just like cross-eyed. Anyways, they basically are like, you have two options. You can either pull him out of school and put him in another school because he's failing across the board and he can't stay here anymore. Or if you don't do that, we're going to expel him. Right. So they, my mom's like, okay, we're going to pull him out. And they pulled me out. I go to a continuation school and the beginning was a great experience because I got straight A's and they had no homework. Days were shorter and I was like with my own people. You know what I mean? Like I was just like with my people. But what came with that is now all of a sudden I met a whole lot more people that were like me. And now I'm experimenting with everything, right? Because now it's like cornucopia of all the kids that were like the drug kids, the kids failing out of school. And we're all getting high before school. We're all getting high after school. We're, getting high at lunch. But I was able to get straight A's there, right? And I was really good at math, just kind of like naturally. And the principal wanted to like lead this new program with the district. And his idea was like, I want to show that these high school kids in continuation are like not bad kids, right? And I'm going to select like the best kids of the school to go and tutor kids at the middle school. And I was his selected guy. Cause again, I always had that ability, I think, to be kind of like the Eddie Haskell, right? Like I could be
charming,
doing all the worst things. And you just didn't really assume it. And I was really good at playing the kind of like, I'm just like, you wouldn't assume that it was me. And so he selects me. I'm like, oh man, I can't wait. It's so great because I'm gonna get a bunch of credits and I get to leave school even earlier. Right. And so I started tutoring at this middle school, showed up for like the first week. And then I made up some elaborate lie and was like, hey, Mr. Tabone sends his like sincerest apologies. There's no one to replace me. And I've got something else I need to do for the next like month, but I'm going to come back in like a month. So he really apologizes. We started a little prematurely, whatever, right? And for some reason, I like thought that this plan was like, I'm going to be able to like not go tutor,
Oh my
but like
gosh.
I'd leave school still and be like, oh, I'm going to tutor. And that I would get away with it for a few weeks and then like go back in and tutor at the end and like everything would be cool. I don't know why I thought this was a good plan, but the principal didn't ask the teacher how she like didn't check in for like a couple weeks. Right. And so I get away with this for a couple weeks and I should have just gone back to tutor again, but I just kept again. It was like one day is so easy, 2 days, 2 weeks, and I'm like, and now it's too late. Now I was like, it's become a way of life. And I show up to school and I see my dad's car, and I'm like, no, dude, you're high, dude. That's not your dad. And then I keep going, and then I see my mom's car, and I'm like, dude, just go to class. And I'm going, and the door opens to the office. They call me in. Mom and dad are sitting there. What's going on? And I'm like, exact same. I'm so high, I can't speak. Right? I'm just like, oh my God. We go in. He expels me on the spot. And then I go to my last high school that was like the worst continuation that you go to in the area that I live. Yeah, and then things just started to progress even further. I run away from home at this point, I think. I'm like renting a bedroom somewhere. I'm selling lots of weed, pills, and I end up somehow graduating a year early because the last continuation school I went to, they allowed you to like challenge the classes. So if you got an 80% or better on the final exam, you just pass the class. And so I was just like, I was really good at like test taking and like let me do it on my own. And so I got the books. I went to the library. I passed every class, right? I just zoomed through it. I was there for like 2-3 months.
So you could take the test early and get out of going.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
yeah.
Were you already doing other drugs by now also, or was it still just weed?
Weed. I was drinking. I was probably taking like somas. I'd take Xanax. There was like some different weekends where I'd take ecstasy. It was kind of like that. I haven't progressed fully into like sort of like dope sick sort of, areas, but I'm testing the boundaries on all the things that, are not like the hardest level drugs. Right. But then I graduate, right. I get my high school diploma and, and now it's like total freedom. Right. I'm like almost 18. I turn 18. I get a DUI. I totaled a car before that.
So you're not living at home anymore?
No, I like knew some dude that like had like a, 2 or 3 bedroom apartment and I like, paid him and like lived there.
What did your other friends think? Like that group of guys that you started smoking weed with, were they still in your life or were they like, wow, RJ's like really fucking up?
Yeah, I think they thought I was really fucking up, but they also were kind of intrigued and maybe interested. And like, it's funny because that whole friend group today, like we're all, we all talk and we're all still friends. They all went on to become like, I think like 3 of them are attorneys,
lawyers and shit.
One of them's like a doctor,
right.
You know what I mean? And the others are like executives at like, Fortune 500 corporations. You know what I mean? Like they all went on. We had a really, our friend group, high school, middle school, high school was a really strong friend group. You know what I mean? Like we're all doing really cool things today. But yeah, no, they distanced from me. I started hanging out with just all sorts of random people. I was kind of a recluse. I had a girlfriend, like a high school girlfriend, and her, she was kind of like, a runaway also, and, had no rules and like, we kind of did our own thing. We would like go to parties and like integrate with people, but we just kind of ran, you know what I mean? We were just like, we did what we wanted and we lived this like totally Bonnie and Clyde like lifestyle that was just like a nonstop. Like when you're that age, it was like wanderlust, you know what I mean? Like we were just I look back and there's lots of consequences and lots of mistakes, but there was also a lot of fun, you know what I mean? And at that age, it's like, it's all fun, right? You're just getting in trouble, but the trouble's really not that bad. And, you're just getting high all the time and no responsibilities. And I'm selling weed to pay my rent. And I've got, tons of money and we're just, just living day to day and then things start getting pretty heavy when I'm like 18. We're taking ecstasy like every weekend. We're doing lots of blow. We're smoking weed 24/7. We're drinking all the time. We're taking Xanax. I mean, it's starting to turn into like fear and loathing, like chaos. And I remember the girlfriend, she kind of has like almost like an overdose one night on a bunch of ecstasy and totally freaks us out. She took her like a couple days to recover from it. And her mom's now freaked out. And next thing I know, her parents send her to a wilderness camp in Idaho. And so girlfriend, who was like my whole life, is just gone, right? Taken in the middle of the night. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm just like beside myself. I'm like trying to contact the wilderness place. I'm like, I know where you are. I'm coming to get her. You know what I mean? Like and I remember her like dad called me and was like, hey, whatever you're doing, like you need to stop. You know what I mean? Like you need to stop. And I'm like, oh, I swear I'm not. But then I kept doing it. You know what I mean? And so anyway, at this point, my life got really, really small. I go to I need help. Remember we go to dinner. It's me, my dad, my mom, and my dad gives me like two options. And this is where things get really interesting for me at 18, probably like formed a lot of how I am today. But he goes, you can go to community college anywhere in the US, but you have to leave California. And to me, growing up in a family where education was not, held on any sort of pedestal, if anything, I feel like education was looked at as that's too bad that you need that to succeed. Right. I feel like that was more of how my family ran, was like education was the route that you took if you really couldn't do it. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah, almost like if you can't do, you teach. You know what I mean? Kind of like that. Yeah. That's kind of how like college and that sort of thing. That's kind of the vibe I always got. Yeah. And so to me, that just seemed like failure. Like having to go to community college was like basically me admitting defeat, that I couldn't hack it, couldn't do it, and couldn't figure it out. And coming from my dad, it was just like, I wanted to die. And so he gave me option 2, which was, I'll get you a one-way ticket to Sydney, Australia. And, you can't call me for any help and you got to figure it out. And so I went to Australia.
So you did that?
And yeah.
Shit.
So it was like, and I think my dad just really kind of saw it as like kind of that old school, like, send them out in the wild and like, figure it out. And he figured, everyone in Australia speaks English. It's extremely friendly to Americans. And it's like the backpacking, like nation, right? Where like travelers go there there's hostels everywhere. There's like, so I land in Sydney. I'm staying at this hostel in Bondi Beach and I'm 18, right? Like I'm 18. And this is back, if you go on my Facebook, this is like 2006. Facebook was just created and you had to have a college EDU to sign up for it. And because when Facebook, it was called The Facebook. Okay. And you had to be a part of a college.
Oh, interesting.
In order, because it was meant for collegiate students only. And so my buddy who had gone to college gave me his I remember it was his email on my Facebook for years. And so I created my Facebook using his, Colorado Boulder University EDU. And right before I left to Australia, and I had no phone, right? Because back then I think I had like the Razor Nokia flip phone, right, or Motorola, right? And so I had no international calling, right? There's not apps like there is today. And so I'm truly like, I'm in Australia with a backpack and a traveler's handbook and $1,000 to my name and in a hostel, and everything is like existing in analog. You know what I mean? Like I gotta like,
I can't believe that was your dad's solution. But I mean,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it.
No, it sounds
I like admire it
amazing.
so
No,
much.
it sounds amazing. And I'm impressed you went without knowing anyone. This is not nearly as cool, but I moved to LA at 22 without knowing anyone, no internet yet, nothing. It's 2002, right? And when I look back on myself doing that, I'm like, damn, like I'm proud of myself for doing it. And I feel like I just didn't know how scary the world could be yet. So I went, right? Like now I know. I can't believe you actually went. So you don't know anyone, you land and find a hostel. And then, yeah, how long are you? And did you bring any drugs with you?
No.
Okay.
Because remember, at this point, I'm
You don't
not
have a
strung out
habit.
or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just using all the time and like using party drugs, but yeah, I wasn't like, I didn't need drugs at that point, right? And so I get there, yeah, I'm in this hostel, and I remember at the hostel, travelers at the front desk, there was like this printout paper, and it had like the little tears that all had phone numbers. And it was like,
Can
oh,
you
there's
see?
fireworks. That's kind of cool.
Why
Yeah.
is that happening?
I'm like, it's listening to my hand signals. That's kind of cool. Like when
Oh,
you do
okay.
this.
Yeah. It does like a like or something. Oh my God. You know how I know that?
Yeah.
Because on Barstool Sports, did you see when, what's his name? Dave Portnoy? You know, he's got the podcast
I
with
love Dave.
Brianna Chicken Fry, and she says something and
Yeah.
bubbles pop up like just did to you. And he was like,
Yeah.
wait, what was that?
Yeah.
And I just saw that like reel on TikTok. That's how I even know what we're looking at. That's hilarious. Okay. So anyways, you get to
Yeah.
Sydney.
So I'm at this hostel. There was these printouts with like phone numbers, and it's like if you're looking for work, and it was like if you're a traveler there, I didn't have like a green card to work. If you're a traveler, you're kind of like the migrant workers of Australia, right? So travelers is kind of like this, we're like the under the table, migrant workers, and so you take the tear off, pick up the phone there, call them, give them your name, and they'd be like, okay, which hostel are you at? And you tell them which hostel, and they'd be like, okay, come outside at 6:45 a.m. We'll pick you up. Look for like the blue van. And so blue van pulls up. I'm 18. I'm like, this is wild, dude. This is wild. And there's like random travelers there that are like filling me in, like, oh yeah, that guy's really good, or this one's da. Like he pays really well, like whatever. And so I'm like, I get in this van. And I worked every kind of job you can imagine. Like I worked on a chicken farm. I worked on a berry farm. I did masonry work. I did bricklaying in Sydney. I just did like it because you didn't know, you know what I mean? Like you didn't know, you'd like go and whatever was needed. I worked for this one tile guy doing masonry work for a while. He was like the coolest dude I worked for. Really loved doing that stuff. And so anyways, I saved up some money, and I ended up buying a car out there, this like really rad Land Rover Discovery. And I got it for like a steal. Like it was crazy. Like this dude owned a surf shop out there, and it was like his daughter's car, but she like hated it. And she had like left to college and was like, why'd you ever buy me this? Cause she's like cheerleader kind of girl. And he bought her like this kind of like lifted, like Land Rover Discovery. You know what I mean? He was like, no, she's going to go in the, like whatever, like, and she was just not that person. And so this car was just sitting in his driveway for a few years. And I was like, I want a car. And he was just like, name your price. I'm like, dude, I don't have that much money. And so it was $1,500. I got this like Land Rover Discovery, and there was these dudes I became friends with at the hostel that were from the Swedish National Guard that were like on leave, and they were like survivalists, right? And I love Swedes. Swedes are like, they're just such great people. There was a lot of other like, ethnicities there that were just not kind.
Okay.
But the Swedes were just like they were awesome. They were like, they loved that I was from California and I was American. And so I'm like, listen, I got the car. You guys know how to survive. Let's team up and let's drive like to the most northern point of Australia. And Australia is like the size of the United States, right? So,
right.
It's like going from like the bottom of Florida all the way up to, almost like to Canada, right? And so we get together and we start cruising. We traveled. Yeah, we traveled all
That's
over,
crazy.
Man. We went from Sydney.
This is the craziest shit I've ever heard. I didn't know this part of your
it was
story.
super cool.
This wasn't in the other interview that I listened to. I didn't know any of this. In the other interview, we jumped from, well, I don't want to get ahead of, I don't want to do the spoiler, but we jumped from high school to like whatever. So, okay, you're in Australia. Are you are you smoking weed or anything with these people, or have you put
No,
down the party
no,
and you
no.
don't even miss it?
It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't putting it down. It wasn't about missing it. It was because at that point, it wasn't, I don't think I smoked weed and drank to like, because, needed to. I think I just did it because it was the thing to do. And I felt
I get
some
it.
level of importance in it. And it made me kind of
Yeah,
I found a role in it, if that makes sense. And so, when I'm in Australia, I was in a different role, right? It was like, the role was like, we're going to travel and survive and figure it out. So it just wasn't like, it wasn't a thought. Right. So, we went out a couple times to like bars and drank, but alcohol was never really a big thing for me. So I didn't really like that. So I didn't really get, super drunk or anything. And we were like living in tents and like living on islands and, fishing. And anyways, we go all the way up to northern Australia. We end up working on dive boats and end up becoming certified scuba divers and dive the Great Barrier Reef. And yeah, it just was like it was a rad experience. Meanwhile, my girlfriend who was sent away to wilderness camp, right? Like this is still going on, right? If there was one drug that I was missing, it was that. Right. Yeah. 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 It wasn't so much like, oh, I need to smoke weed because I want to get high. It was like, when am I going to be able to see my girlfriend again? And so I would send her emails from internet cafes, right? Because I didn't have a phone. So we find an internet cafe every whatever week or couple weeks, send her an email. One day I'm reading the emails and she emailed me back. And she had been, we hadn't talked in months, right? She went to a wilderness camp. Then she went to an all girls school and she was under total lockdown. I also don't have a phone because I'm in Australia. We finally connect and she's like, call me, it was like 3 p.m. tomorrow, which was, like 2 a.m. in Australia or whatever it was. And I remember being in the middle of the night and I had all these Australian dollar coins and I'm using a payphone and I call her mom's phone and she answers and we just started like, oh my God, like we miss each other. I love you. Like the whole thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get home like immediately. Like I need, I need to get home immediately. Right. Sell the car, book a flight. Like I'm coming home back to LA. So come back and I had some money. I think I had like, I don't know, like 7, 8, 9 grand. Right. So I went there with like 1,000. I came back with like a lot more, especially at like 18, 19. Right. I'm like, oh my God, I'm rich. And so then I go to my dad and I'm like, okay, hey, so I did the Australia thing. I'll go to community college, but I want to go in California, right? I just wanted to be able to be with a girlfriend, right? So I go up to Santa Barbara City College, find a room to rent, sign up for classes. And I had like all the best intention, like I'm going to go. And I went to the first class of all the classes. And I'm like, I got all this money and I don't want to run out of money. And I don't like working a 9 to 5. Like, that's crazy. Like, what am I getting paid? Like $8 an hour? Like, that's just like insanity to me. And so I go to a hydroponic store and I build a whole grow room in my apartment. And I'm like, I'm just going to grow weed, right? Like, that's going to be like, I'm going to put all this money, I'm going to invest it into like a grow room. I'm going to grow weed. I'm going to go to school. I won't have to work. And then when it's all done being grown, I'll sell it and make a bunch of money. Right. So I start growing weed. I never go back to class. I'm lying to my parents. Oh yeah, I've got, B's. I got an A. I got, and anyways, I start selling a lot of drugs again. Right. And then I moved down back towards the hometown and because I knew more people, so I could sell more drugs. And this is where things start to take like, serious turn. And I'm getting fronted, 5 pounds a week and I'm selling a lot of weed. I think I'm like 19, 20, maybe I'm 20 now. And I get robbed at gunpoint. Like dudes come up in ski masks, gun in my roommate's face, steal everything, all my money. And then I owed these dudes a bunch of money because they were fronting me weed and I'd pay them back. And so now, now I'm like, oh shit, I'm really fucked.
Like a home invasion? Like they knock on the door and bust in?
So I was actually not there. I'm coming home, but my roommate I like would front him an ounce and he would like sell weed. And I had a rule, like you no one ever knows where we live, but I'm gone. And he was inviting some of his friends. And I think he was just bragging. You know, I mean, we were super young and he was not following the protocol. You know what I mean? And he like, I think he cared more about being cool than, and whatever. So I'm coming back home and I can see on the third floor, I'm like, there's three dudes in ski masks that are like entering my apartment. And I'm like, I run up there. And by the time I get up there, my roommate's there with one of our friends. They're like on their knees. There's a gun pulled on them. And these dudes are ransacking my apartment. They make me get on my knees. They take my safe with all the cash. They kick my bedroom door down. They take all the weed. I mean, I get cleared out. They take the pillow sacks. You know what I mean? They take my laptop, his laptop. I mean, they're just things of value that are easy to take. They're just collecting. And they leave. You know, I now owe these people money. I had a friend who's now sober a long time, who's also my real estate agent. Great dude. He was love him, man, but he was the dude that introduced me to opiates. So he had the connect to all the crooked doctors in the valley. You know what? This is back in like 2008 or something. This is during that whole pharmacies weren't cross checking. You know, you could get triple scripts from different doctors. So I'm like, listen, dude, like you got to help me out, dude. I owe these people money. Like you got to get me in. He brings me into the doctors. I start going to these crooked doctors. I'm getting huge prescriptions of Oxycontin and Roxy's and Xanax. And I've got insurance that's covering the cost at the pharmacies.
To sell
So
it.
I'm basically getting to sell it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
To sell it.
Okay.
And then our first time going to the doctor, he gets his prescription filled and we go to a Little Caesars and because he wanted to get a hot and ready. And we're sitting in the car and he crushes up an oxy and snorts it. And I'm like, oh, dude, and at this point, I'd always tried anything, right? Like there was nothing like I didn't try. And I'm like, hey, I want to, do one for me. And he's like, oh, no. And this was like that warning, right? Kind of like in the Big Book where it's like the tombstone doggerel, you know what I mean?
Ominous
and it's
warnings.
like this,
yeah.
That I did not heed, and he's just like, you don't want to do this, dude. Like, I'm telling you, like, you get stuck. It's so good. Like, you just don't ever try it. Like, don't do it. And I'm like, all right, dude. Like, the fact that you think you can do it and you think that I can't do it is just like, yeah, this is not working for me. So he leaves and goes inside and I just grab one and crush it up and do it myself. Right. And I didn't want any pizza. So he's in there getting a pizza. I'm in the car. I'm crushing one up. I do it. By the time he gets back out, which is maybe like 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, whatever, I am like drooling, right? Like I'm just like, I'm so high. If you go back in my story about like kind of control and all of those things, the first time I did opiates, man, it was like, oh, this is it. Every single piece of me that is like uncomfortable, controlling, all of that was just gone. And I'm like, it just was like, must be what other people feel like all the time. And this is the thing that like, this is the tweaked part of me. This compound fucking fills that gap. And so, of course it's like, it's on and running and I'm snorting oxys every day. My girlfriend who's with me is like really like she's on to me. You know what I mean? Like what is going on? Remember she went to wilderness and boarding school. So she's like not doing drugs and she's picking up on the fact that like I'm clearly high. I'm lying. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I won't admit it. She breaks up with me. And then this buddy, we go back out again to get more pills. He's going into a bathroom and he's smoking something. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's trying to hide it from me. Like the same way he was trying to, I'm like, why are we hiding this? You know what I mean? Like, what is the deal here, dude? And he's like, it's heroin. You don't want to do it. And I'm like, well, you don't know that I don't want to do that. And essentially it was like, I'm like, asked him a million questions. And he's like, I do it because it's cheaper and it's stronger. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great to me. Because at this point I'm strung out on oxys and I'd make more money if I could sell them rather than, doing them. And so I try a little bit of heroin and, for the next I don't know, maybe 3 months, I'm just smoking heroin every day, right? It's just like morning, noon, and night, I'm smoking heroin and I just want to get off, like I just want to stop. I wasn't like the type of drug addict that was like, oh man, like in the beginning, I found it and was like, oh, it's amazing. And then once I was like smoking heroin every day and I just wanted to not smoke heroin every day, it was like my obsession. Like, how the do I stop? You know? And yeah, right. It just, I don't, because again, it was like I got relief, right? I got this freedom, but then I went into a whole new prison. And my sense of control all of a sudden, well, it was like that thing that I'm like, I'm a very controlling person. The control was relieved when I first got high. Now that controlling part of me is wrestling with the fact that I'm now completely caged, right?
Right, totally.
And
Yes.
and I just want out. I just want out. So I'm researching. I'm like calling people I knew were like, doing drugs, and I didn't use with anybody. Like I used alone. I didn't have friends that used. Like no one knew that I was like doing. I was just like, no, like I am doing this by myself. So now I'm like desperately trying to get out. I don't want to admit it to anybody that actually cares about me, and I'm still living on my own, still selling drugs, and I just am like my life is falling apart, and I miss my girlfriend. And so, anyways, this one girl that I sold drugs to, I knew she was strung out. And so I asked her, I'm like, dude, how do you get off this stuff? Like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, there's this magic substance. It's called Suboxone. You just take Suboxone and you're good. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, there is a thing that you take and this, like, it cures you. And because that's how she framed it. Right. And I think she was trying to get more oxys from me and she wanted to do like a trade.
Oh.
And so she sold it really well. Like she sold
Oh
it.
my God. Okay.
Phenomenally well. Right. I'm like, okay, cool. So this was back when the Suboxones were like the orange pills. They were like the stop signs. And you remember, like they were like those chunky
the orange
pills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, today, like I feel like kids today just know the strips, right? But like back then, it was like these big
pills.
old chunk, pills. And so she gave me like 3, I think, and she was like, "Okay, just wait until you're like kind of not feeling good, and then put a whole one underneath your tongue and let dissolve." Oh my
God! She didn't say wait 24 hours or anything.
No, yeah. So I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought it was a miracle drug. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, this is a miracle.
It can be if you wait 24 hours,
It can be, but so I wait like maybe 4 or 5, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like I wait until I'm like, oh, I want to get high again. You know what I mean? And my eyes are a little watery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I pop a whole one underneath my tongue, let it dissolve. And I'm like sitting there. I remember there was a movie I was watching, and all of a sudden it was like my whole body started to hurt so bad. I mean, like goosebumps everywhere. And like I started to enter into this place where it was like, I cannot, like, I just can't. I don't know what is happening right now. I think I'm going to die. And for hours, I am like dry heaving and like crying. Like I'm like, my body is convulsing. And it gets to the point where it's like, maybe 1 a.m. or midnight. I call the ex-girlfriend who broke up with me. And I just call on repeat until she answers. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I think I'm going to die. I need your help. She comes over, sees me in just like the most, ridiculous, state ever. And, I tell her everything, right? There's like foil out. There's, you know what I mean? It's just not a good scene. And so she calls my mom, mom calls dad. And now everyone's aware, the lid's off. And I just want help. You know what I mean? I'm just like, dude, whatever it takes, like, whatever I have to do. And so then I go to my first rehab in Utah. I was supposed to go for 28 days. I love this. It's one of my favorite stories. I tell the story to like newcomers all the time, like especially guys and girls that are coming into Oak Forest, because it's, it's like the same way I viewed AA as public transportation, right? Like I'm supposed to go for 28 days. I have no idea what rehab is. I'm desperate. I want relief. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I fly to Utah. I get there. I go into the detox process, which was hell, right? Like hell.
So
day
wait,
four.
were you able to get well when you were in precipitated withdrawals? Did you figure out if you smoked dope, you'd feel better? Like, how did you get through that?
Yeah. So I get more dope. And it's funny, my
Okay.
dad finds this rehab, and the owner of the rehab tells because they couldn't take me for like, it was like 4 or 5 days because they were like full, or I don't know what it was. So she tells my dad, like, you're going to have to let him get high. And so my dad actually gave me money. And I was like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah.
And
But
went and
like,
bought,
that's legit though. That's kind of smart.
listen,
You
it
did
was
have to
super
keep getting
smart.
high. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was super smart. I'm like, I was so great because it was like, it was this weird area because I then went to my dad's house. I was staying at my dad's house and I'm smoking heroin in my room at my dad's house, and my dad knows I am. I mean, it was like the strangest, like weird, I'm using with impunity right now, sort of land. It was so odd. And then I go to this rehab. Day 14, I'm through the detox, right? And dude, I was feeling so good. I mean, I didn't realize that like you could be free like this. Like I forgot what it was like because it had been, I don't know, not like it had been like years or something, but at that age, it seemed like an eternity that I had been, strung out. And day 14, I felt great. I remember I woke up and I like got a good night's sleep, and I was just like, oh my God, dude, they did it. They did it. They thought it was going to take 28 days. They did it in 14. And so I'm like, I'm ready to go home. You know what I mean? Like you guys did, like, dude, this 28-day process, you got it done in 14 days. 5-star review. You guys are fantastic. Packed my bags. They're like, that's not how this works. And I'm like, I'm an adult. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go ahead and get my phone and my wallet, please. And they're like, well, that's going to be like an AMA. And I'm like, you call it whatever you want.
Right.
Whatever you need to do to make yourselves, whatever the procedural, acronym, just give me my stuff. And so they give me my stuff. They discharge me, and I'm in northern Utah in January. I had just turned, I think, 21, and I stand outside the front door, and I got this big suitcase. I'm in like a sweatshirt and shorts, and there's like 4 feet of snow. You know what I mean? Like it is cold as shit out. And I had one of those chocolate Nokia phones. And I remember turning it on, and there was a slit open, turn it on, call my dad. And my dad said, it was something along the lines of like, you're homeless. You know what I mean?
Like I'm not
you
coming to
have,
get you.
you have nowhere to go. Goodbye. You know what I mean? Like click. And so then I stand up there for a minute. I'm like, wow, I have no money. I have nothing. Like I am shit out of luck right now. So I turn around and like sheepishly like knock on the door, right? Like, you know what I mean? And the program director opens the door just a crack. And she's like, hey, like, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, I was really kind of considering like, you guys were really great. Like, we might as well just do 2 more weeks. You know what I mean? And she's like, oh yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and she obviously knows, you know what I mean? Like they're in with my dad, like, and I like can't admit it. You know what I mean? I'm like, and she's like, well, we can go back through the admissions process. And I'm like, okay, whatever we got to do, like, let's just do it. You know what I mean? It's cold out here. They bring me in. I'm sitting down in like their main office, and they're like, okay, so now that we know a little bit more about you, things are a little bit different, and you can come back. We'll allow you back, right? If you do now 60 days and tomorrow's day one, right? So like, I'm like, oh my God, I just wanted to get back to my girlfriend, right? Like, I just want to get back to my girlfriend. And I thought I had 2 more weeks. My 2 more weeks turned into, 8 more weeks. And I had my first moment of like real surrender. Like, this is a Chinese finger trap. RJ, you are the bringer of all your own chaos. And you really need to stop fighting everything and everyone like right now in this moment. Like, you need to stop right now. And so I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I surrender. Like, it's all good. I'm not going to fight. I realize that you guys have all the power and control right now, and I have none. Like I get it. Like, I am had right now. And they were like, but that's not all. After you finish the 60 days, you're then going to do 6 months in an all men's structured sober living in Salt Lake City. So my 2 more weeks turned into 8 more months in like 30 minutes. You know what I
Oh
mean?
my God. Yeah.
And I'm 21. I mean, like this was like I was talking to some, I was talking to this 18-year-old kid the other day, and he was like considering like 90 days of doing. I'm like sitting there. I'm like, dude, I get it. That's like it's like an eternity, right?
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
that's when you're that young. You know what I mean?
Even
Three
now.
months.
Yeah, dude, even now, I went to my first rehab at 31 and they wanted me to go for 4 months. And I was like, no, I got to get
Yeah.
back to work. It just doesn't seem reasonable. So,
Yeah, I agree to stay. And, I think maybe this is also kind of part of my makeup or whatever. Like it was like when I went to Australia, if I'm doing something, like I'm gonna do it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like the pain in the ass, client, other than like, okay, I tested to see what kind of power I had, realized I had none, realized that I'm boxed in and I'm not gonna sit in resentment and be mad about this. I'm going to be the very, very best client that they have ever seen in the history of this rehab. Right. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to like, whatever. I'm going to lean into the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do every single thing and not even out of resentment. I like truly enjoyed every single piece of it and became like the house leader and, was doing all the things, the extra things, but it was a Mormon based place, right? So it was not 12 step. And they took us to our first AA meeting, which is where I got that analogy of AA being like public transportation. We went to this meeting in northern Utah, basement of a church. Everyone had a share. And my first AA share, and I share about this all the time when I'm doing like a lead or speaker or whatever. My first AA share was it got to me. I refused to identify as an alcoholic. One, I just said my name. And then I proceeded to, pontificate to this entire room that the reason that they're alcoholics is because they keep saying that they're alcoholics. And I went on to this long winded speech that I thought was like poetry in verbal motion, you know? And 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 I remember like my fellow rehab dudes, like we left after or at the meeting ended and everyone kind of was like, keep coming back, great cheer, man. You know what I mean? Like they were doing the AA thing, right? Like no one came up and was like, you were wrong or anything like they were like, yeah, keep coming. I'm like, holy shit, dude. Like I got it. I totally dropped some knowledge on these dudes.
right,
And we
right.
leave and all my rehab dudes are like, right on, like in the band, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, whatever. And so that's where I saw AA is like, okay, this is not for me. It is like a lack of, mental power, right? I cannot use if I just choose not to. So I finished the whole, 8.5 months out there. I just had the greatest time ever, and living in Salt Lake City and like going to cool little like sober meetups and like just hikes and rivers and it was a really great time in my life. And I was really bought into sobriety. Like I was bought in. Like I was not bought into recovery, but I was bought into sobriety. I was like, wow. It was like I got back to that place that I was at where I'm like, yeah, I'm never doing drugs. Like I was just bought back into sobriety. And I'm like, I want to achieve. I want to do really well. I want to make a lot of money. I want to do all these great things with my life. And I'm 21 years old. Like just do it now, dude. And so I come back from Utah. I start working for my dad. He owned a company where we live and it was automated welding machines. And so I got a sales job there. And, it was like, I'm going to work harder than anybody and everybody else. And my whole life became, work hard, make money, right? And like, that's going to be the key. Like the reason RJ, you got sober is so that you can be super successful. And that if you're super successful, you're going to be so stoked on life, you'll never have to drink or use, right? Like that was the logic that just made sense to me. And girlfriend and I are like back together. I get a room for rent and then I get an apartment. And this is the same girlfriend since high school, right?
That's
Like,
crazy.
yeah. It's years. Like we are years and like our stories have like, we've like gone different ways and come back. And it's been chaos. We were using buddies. We were intertwined in so many ways. And our relationship, I think, was just really, really unhealthy, toxic, immature, young, and just had no real, footing. And so we just kind of were like together and then not together and like together and breaking up and like both of us insecure and just not good. Like I look back and I'm like, it was a good experience, but like the relationship was just really not, on any sort of healthy ground. And so anyways, she gets pregnant and yeah, like stop taking her birth control,
Or
like,
on
and
purpose? Wait, on purpose?
I don't know if all of that is like on purpose. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
She's my ex-wife today and the
Okay.
mother of
Okay.
my daughter.
Yeah. The only reason I say on purpose is because you said stop taking birth control. So I'm wondering, like, normally you wouldn't do that. I guess you could forget or
Yeah.
something. You know what I
I mean,
mean?
I think it was a little underhanded.
Be careful though. You got to pay this person alimony or whatever the fuck. So we
Yeah,
won't even say
yeah,
anything.
yeah. Listen,
Okay.
listen. I think I look back. Here's my perspective on it. I'm 100% responsible for the things that happen in my life, right? Regardless of any sort of anything, I'm not a victim, and I made decisions that I made, and I'm completely responsible for my end of that deal. You know what I mean? Whether we were broken up and I'm still, sleeping with her, or she stopped taking birth control and we were both just not well. And so she gets pregnant. I remember she called me. I'm at work. I thought she was like messing with me at first. Like really, like I was like, there's no, like I thought, I'm like, I was really young too. I mean, imagine I was like, what, like 23, I think at the time. So, God, I'm super young and I'm freaking out. And I'm like, okay, well, you got to move back in with me. Cause I had like kicked her out, right? Like, it's just, she had been kicked out, moved in, kicked out. Like we were, chaos. And she was like, she said this phrase and I'll never forget it. And she goes, my grandmother, cause I'm telling her like, you got to move back in with me. If we're keeping it, like, you got to move back in. Let's like do the deal. Let's do the thing. And she goes, my grandmother told me this phrase. She goes, why would you buy the cow if you get the milk for free? I remember she said that, and I was like, at my 23, I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Like, what is that? What do you even mean by that? I don't have a ranch. Like, there's no cows here. And she was like, well, she's like, essentially, I'm not moving in with you unless you marry me. And I'm like, oh shit. Wow. Oh my God. I'm like checkmated here. So I'm like, if we're going to get married, for legal reasons, because I was like, we can get married like after the kid's born, like have a wedding. Like I don't want to do that right now. Well, we're going to get married for legal reasons in order for you to move back in with me. Like, let's not tell anybody, and we'll just go to Vegas and get married. So we drove to Vegas. We got married in Vegas with nobody there. Yeah, chaos, dude, chaos. And anyways, like we come back. Everyone knows there's so many little side stories in that and family dramas and like just, it's all not good. Like there's just noise. It's just the whole thing is just, I'm insecure and full of fear. I'm sober, but I have no recovery. We're both super young. We're engaged in like weird ego battles. Like the whole thing is just riddled with pitfalls and landmines and just not good, And I end up buying a house where we live out here and was like doing well at work, right? Buy this house. We move in. My daughter's born. And before my daughter was born, or maybe after, it's such a blurry time. It was either right before or right after. We go out to dinner and I have a glass of wine. And essentially, I'm having this glass of wine because I'm super uncomfortable and I'm really kind of not happy with where my life is, right? I just want relief. But I pitch it as like, I deserve to have a glass of wine because look at all the success in my life. I remember I have this glass of wine. I had 4.5 years at the time, or 4 years sober at that point. I have this glass of wine. Wife looks at me. She's like, you better not tell anybody that you have 4 years sober anymore. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And I didn't even like wine. Like it didn't give me what I wanted. And so a week later, I bought a 6-pack of Heineken and Heineken didn't do the deal. You know what I mean? I drank like 2 beers watching like Lakers versus Celtics. It was like 2012. And I'm just like, this is lame. I don't even know why people do this. So then I go on Facebook, I find an old friend and I'm like, I just need to buy like a couple Norcos. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just get like a couple pain pills, not like the most extreme ones. Just I'll find a couple pain pills because painkillers were to me what I thought like beer or wine was to other people, right? And so I'm justifying it in my mind in this way. And I'm like, if I just buy a couple, I'll just take a couple, like I'm watching the game, take a couple, like just chill. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, do it for a night, like not do it again for like a couple weeks, like whatever. Friend can't get Norcos, but he's like, I can get black tar heroin. And I'm like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, it's an opiate. Like, I'll just use a little bit, right? So, and then I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this illegal thing, I'm going to buy heroin and I've got this like whole life. Might as well buy enough Costco wholesale that I never have to buy it again. Right. And these are like the little justifications, right? These little things that just keep moving. And so I buy a bunch of heroin and I bring it home. I don't get high immediately. I put it in the garage. I'm like, I'm going to do this on like Saturday. Saturday comes. I smoke a little bit. It was like Saturday morning. And then like a few hours later, I'm like, oh, you could use for like one day. Like one day is fine. Right. So then I get high all Saturday. I'm going to bed Saturday night and I'm like, okay, well, it's still technically Saturday. So I like run down to the garage and I like do a little bit more before I go to bed. And then I wake up Sunday morning and I'm like, it wasn't until like mid Saturday morning. You're still within the 24-hour framework. And I'm just like, it's so strange how I'm like justifying all of this. And then I'm like, okay, dude, who you playing? Like 48 hours is fine. Right. You just can't get high for like, you can't
days.
Get high for like
we know the rule.
Yeah. Like 48 hours is fine. So all of a sudden I went from like just using one Saturday morning to like all Saturday to Saturday night to Sunday morning to like carte blanche 48 hours. You're good. Casino license for 48 hours. And I'm like, the stop to that is like Monday morning, you got to work, dude. So like, you're definitely not going to get high because you got to go to work. And then of course, like I go to work and then I run home on my like break and I like get high and then I like bring some for lunch. And then, it turns, next thing I know, like a week has gone by and I've used all of it. Like I've used all of it. I'm strung out. Like I'm in. Like there's no turning back. Like I'm in and it's bad. You know what I mean? And the wife's starting to pick up on it. I've got a newborn. Things are just unraveling. She's catching me in bathrooms. It is just like, I've got to maintain my job. I work for my dad. He doesn't know. There's so much life now happening and I have to maintain it all and get high. And now I'm back in this place where I've now recruited my wife and I'm like, I got to get sober. And so I'm like, I got to get high until I get sober, but I got to get sober. So like, let's figure it out. Like we'll go to a doctor. We'll figure out, we got to get the things and I'll do it on like a weekend. Dude, it just turns into this. It's just a
nightmare.
Melee.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare trying to get off of opiates. It's a fucking nightmare.
And for me, at least, I think probably a lot of people relate to this, right? It's like this, man, I want to not get high. I want to stop. I am actively not wanting to continue getting high. And so there's this split personality thing that's happening, right? Because there's me who honestly, truly, like I am like fucking just begging, like I do not want to get high again. And then there's this other piece of me, which is like, it can't not. It can't not. It can't not. And so while I am setting up all the mechanisms to not get high, that same person that's building the strategy to not get high is also building in trapdoors to get high still. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like those two things are happening
totally
simultaneously. And I am truly, authentically trying to not get high. But I am also setting up trapdoors along the way to where I can still get high. And I can't imagine what it's like to be in the intimate place with somebody, deeply in a relationship with them, and dealing with what would seem like probably this like schizoaffective, thing where like I am super convincing because I truly believe what I'm saying, but yet I also keep getting high and lying to you about it, right? Like it is just...
It's horrible. I can't remember if I told you this. My husband was just using for like a year. And now he has a year and a month. In a month, he'll have a year. But it was the same thing. Like, I'm trying to help. It is horrible. Like you said, I can't imagine. I was on the other side of that for so long, like we are. And then once I was on like my mom's side or, the codependent side, it was like awful. So
I have a lot of compassion for both sides. I have so much compassion for both sides because at this point, working in the field of addiction it's been, God, almost 8 years, right? I've like touched so many families. I've like walked through so many different situations and circumstances and, I've seen them all, right? Like from all over the country, and so I've really gotten close to a lot of families dealing with that, just like they can't wrap their brain around it. And then also being a gnarly dope fiend myself, knowing that in so many cases, like I genuinely am not lying. And he's not lying when he's telling you like he doesn't want to get high and he wants to stop, and yet is completely incapable of doing so. Right. And it doesn't matter like the loss of a wife, the loss of a kid, none of those things will ever, in my opinion, suffice to actually get somebody to have enough self-will to stop. Right. There has to be, divine intervention or life circumstances or people and parents and mechanisms that, rip us away from that thing. Right. Because that's what we require. So anyways, fast forward, she's filing for divorce. I like sign everything over to her in a quit claim deed. Thinking I was going to save our marriage. She was like, yeah, you sign everything over and show you trust me. I literally signed my entire life over to her, and she gets a restraining order. And then I end up homeless in Simi Valley, and I'm holding a cardboard sign, begging for money and living out of Starbucks bathrooms and finding places to sleep on the sides of buildings and in and out of like really, really terrible halfway houses and shooting speedballs at just, the fastest rate I possibly could.
So at some point you graduate to needles.
Oh
obviously.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
During that period, not because of somebody, I looked it up online and I heard that like, one, you're going to get higher, and two, you're going to you use less. Right. So like you'll be able to make it last longer. I'm like, that all sounds great. Like from a cost analysis benefit, model, that I should probably do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And which I don't recommend for anybody. If you haven't used needles and you're watching this and you're like getting high, so like don't ever do it. And like that, maybe that even makes you want to do it, but don't do it. Like, because I wish I never did. It's something that I just wish I never experienced because it's just terrible. So at the end of this, I have an abscess on my left wrist and I'm going to the hospital to get it operated on, and a PICC line in me for antibiotics. And I throw my sweatshirt on and I run out of the hospital with the PICC line still in me. And now I'm like shooting up through this PICC line. I'm a mess. Like my face is picked off. I'm in this Motel 6. And there was this dude my mom had contacted, owns a sober living in my area. Phenomenal guys, good friends today. Love him. He's actually my architect and helps me with all these things in my business and sponsors guys at Oak Forest, and phenomenal human being. I have so much profound respect for him. And he showed up to this hotel room and he knocked on the door, and I'm in there like in a stupor. You know what I mean? Like I am like in a coma. And I remember like coming to, and someone's knocking on the door and he's going, pizza delivery. And I remember this is like ringing in my head. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I didn't know. And I'm like, one eye's open. I like stumble to the door and I open it, and it's this dude. And his name's Ross M. So you got Ross M out there. He's like, maybe late 40s. And then he's got his dude who's like living at his sober living, this kid named Jake. And they're both looking at me and they start laughing. Right? Like the way we dope fiends laugh at each other, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, I didn't feel like I was being laughed at. I truly felt like someone like was laughing at like the incredible state.
They've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. And he looks at me and he goes, listen, don't move. Look at me. And I'm like, I don't even know if I had a shirt on. He's like, you got two options and you got like 30 seconds to make a choice. You either come with me right now. You don't turn around. You don't turn around. Like literally at this door, you walk forward and you come with me right now and get in my car and detox and get sober, and I'll give you a place to stay. Or if you have to think about it or you turn around, I'm leaving. And option's gone. And I remember just sitting there like, you know, like, and I just had that. I remember like I recalled back in Utah, like the surrender. I'm just like, fuck it, dude, go. And I just fall forward and get in the car, go there, detox cold turkey. It was the worst detox of my life. I mean, it was like truly horrendous, like horrific. I don't think anyone should ever detox cold turkey. I think it's like the most horrific punishment on the
I don't
planet.
either. Yeah,
And
I agree.
I don't think that it keeps you sober. And I don't think it helps with anything. And I think it's absolutely
It
ridiculous.
doesn't. It may be what happens sometimes, but it's not why you stayed sober. My last kick
Right.
was cold turkey. It's not why I was sober this time. It's because I had used for long enough that I was done. It was unrelated to the pain of that kick. So,
Correct. Yeah. Anybody that thinks that like someone needs to detox cold turkey, I think it's just
well,
horrendous.
they don't know. Anyone that says that is not an opiate addict. I don't know that I've ever met an opiate addict who says that would actually work. You should, now that I say that, I might have a listener say, oh, I agree. And if you do, okay, fine. Yeah, a Suboxone 5-day taper or 7-day taper is great. Or stay on it, whatever you want to do. But some sort of Suboxone Ambien combo for a few days
just
fucking helpful.
knock somebody out for a little bit because it's
knock them
inhumane.
out. Yeah. Especially now with fentanyl, you have to wait even longer before you take a sub. So whatever, I mean, sure you do that at your detoxes, but anyways, so you kick for the last time.
No, not the last time. But no. That's also why I say I'm like, you know, detoxing cold turkey ain't it.
Yeah.
But I get through it. I'm like, I remember being like awake for like 12 days. I was like losing my mind. But I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to get through this and get through it. They're like, you're going to get a sponsor. You're going to go to AA. You're going to make this number one priority of your life and you're going to sponsor the guys. And I'm like, fantastic. I was like super desperate, willing. I'll take public transportation for as long as I need to. Thank you very much. I'm happy that the bus system is running and working. Sign me up. You know what I mean? And I start going, another bozo on the bus, right? And I get a sponsor, and man, here's the deal, right? This is the recovery deal. And God, I had to go through so many years and so many lessons to learn this, but it's like the incredible recuperative powers of the ego, right? And that first rehab experience, it took 14 days. 14 days, that ego was back, and I'm like, oh, I'm good. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Right? I'm going to go ahead and take control back. And this time I get to like, now it's like 80 days, right? Because, you know, or 75 days it took for that ego to come back. And I'm in my 4-step, and I have an ex-wife and I have a kid, and I've got responsibilities, and she took my house, don't you know? And I need to get an attorney, and I got some shit I got to figure out. And that ego piece of me was like, listen, the bus has served its purpose for long enough. And they were like, do not get a job. Do not work. Do not become money focused, dude. Like, finish your step work. Like, do nothing else. And I'm like, listen, I don't think you know, like, I clearly don't know me. Like, I'm special. I'm not just special. I'm special. Right.
Yeah.
And like, when I say that, like, I mean it like in the sense of like, I can do both. I can do all things. I can go get a job. I can make a lot of money. I can continue to call my sponsor. I can still go to meetings. I can still do all the stuff because I can, right? And no God in that at all, right? Like, I'm not praying at all. I was like, you know what I mean? So I am trusting only my mind, which is the center of my disease, is my mind speaking to me in my own voice. And I start drinking my own Kool-Aid again, right? And I go get a sales job down at a company in Beverly Hills, and I make all these sweet promises, right? Like, I bought this $800 beater car because I got some unemployment that came in. I'm like, later, guys, from the sober living. I don't need all this rules and structure. Don't worry, I'm going to call my sponsor. I'm going to keep doing my step work. I'm going to come back to my meeting once a week with him. Of course, I moved down to Hollywood because the new job's in Beverly Hills. I don't call my sponsor again. I don't go back to another AA meeting. And the whole time I'm justifying it, right? Like, oh, I'm going to call him tomorrow, right? Today was busy. It was like, first day at the new office. Okay, I'm going to call him next week. This is I was moving, right? Okay, once I get my feet underneath me, then I'll go back up there. I'll go check in with him. We'll get it started again. It's not like it's going anywhere, right? And somehow a week to 2 weeks to a month to 3.5 years later, right? 3.5 years later, I'm sober, but I have no recovery. I have not called that sponsor ever again. I didn't go back to another single AA meeting, right? And I'm in like the hub. I'm in like Hollywood. There's so much good AA out there. I don't check out any of it, right? I said I was like, I had lots of intentions to do that just tomorrow, right? And I find myself doing well at work. I became a sales guy at this sort of tech company, and I've got some money in the bank, and I'm hanging out with all these people that were in the New York Film Academy to become, actors and actresses. And we go out to the bungalow in Santa Monica as we would. Like I'd go out with all these, I had just a bunch of normal friends, like normie friends I made. We'd go out to like One Oak, and we'd go out to like different clubs. And like, I was just sober. I was like, I don't drink or do drugs. And we go out this one night, and there was this girl that I was just like, oh my God, she's it. You know what I mean? Like she is. It's funny because we still talk today. She actually messaged me today. She's going to be in California at the end of this month. She's an amazing human being, right? Like amazing. And she didn't know that I'm like, a horrific drug addict. You know what I mean? Like she meets me, I'm living in Hollywood and like, trying to put a life together. And we go out to the bungalow in Santa Monica, and she walks up and, has drinks for everybody, right? And she hands me a drink, and I don't even think. I'm just like, grab the drink, start drinking. She liked to do a little bit of cocaine, right? So now we're drinking and doing blow. I'm like, this is not a big deal. You know what I mean? I just don't do the hard stuff, right? Her connect is now gone. She's like, wants some more blow for the weekend coming up. We're like a thing. I'm like, don't worry. I got the guy, right? I gotta be the person that comes through. You know what I mean? Call my old dealer. I buy a bunch of cocaine from him, and he goes to hand me a free balloon of heroin, a free 40 sack. And I'm like, no, I'm good, dude. Like, I don't need that. And he's like, no, it's free. And I'm like, I'm not going to use it, but maybe I'll just put it in the safe. Maybe somebody else might need it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I have to use it. It's free. Like, I just go put it in the safe. I'll just be there, collect it. You know what I mean? I don't even make it back up to my condo. I go back down the stairs. I got like to the second floor. I go back down the stairs, get in my car, drive to Walgreens, buy a 10-pack of rigs. I'm in the parking lot of Walgreens. I'm like, I'm just going to do like one little shot. Like just one little shot. I use the entire 40 sack sitting there in the Walgreens parking lot, because I'm mixing it with Coke, right? So I'm just fucking doing shot. I mean, I was maybe there for like 2 hours. And then I call homie, and he's like back in Pacoima. And I'm like, yo, dude, I got to get some more black. And he's like, well, I'm in Pacoima. I'm like, cool. I'm on my way. You know what I mean? Like, tell me what street. Drive out there, buy a bunch of heroin, and now I'm shooting speedballs. Right. Like now I'm just like, I've got this girlfriend who's like becoming an actress. She's like super amazing, like such a incredible human. And I'm surrounded by all these really cool, interesting people. And I am like in the bathroom shooting speedballs and trying to maintain life and trying to go to work and trying to like drink and do blow, but also like sneak speedballs in the bathroom, and everything blows up. Right. She's like finds out, and she's just like horrified. You know what I mean? Like, wait, what? You know what I mean? And she leaves, right? She's gone. Like, she's just like out of here. And I end up just, I stop showing up to work. And, at the end of that, I'm like stealing food from Whole Foods, because I live there in West Hollywood, right next to Whole Foods. I'm like going into Whole Foods to steal granola out of the bins to eat. And I finally got to a place where what does every good drug addict do when they're at the end of their rope and they're desperate and they're like, at least for me, I call my mom.
I was just going to say, call your mom. Yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty
call
standard.
Mommy.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm dying. You know what I mean? Like, Mom, I need your help, and I'm like, just, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, come and help me. And so she comes and gets me. She drops me off at this sober living in the area that back in the Westlake area, kind of like this shitty sober living, I get there, I kick, I go through it, and I was just done, man. I was so done at this point. Like, I was so done. The boss at my old work, like, he wanted me to not quit. He wanted me back there. I quit. I'm like, I'm not coming back. I'm not doing sales again. I'm just not doing anything I've ever done. I'm just not doing it. I was so done, man. I think like you were saying in your story, like you just get to that place where you're just like, you're so done. And at this point, my done took the identity of not such a long period of drug use, right? Because my drug use was very, compared to like so many stories I've heard, it was very minimal, right? It was like a couple months, right? It's like a couple months at a time. And I got sober at 20, right? 4.5 years, 3.5 years. And so my drug use was short lived. It was hard. I mean, it was, thousands and thousands of dollars, like lots of money, $1,000 a day habit within about a week, but it was very short lived. And my bottom really looked like I didn't trust myself in the sense that like, it's so hard to build a life from nothing. It's so hard to like start over. And I had built this 4.5 year sober life where I'm working for my dad, doing really well. I bought a house. I got married. I had a kid. I mean, we had 3 cars and I had a Ducati. And I was just like, that took 4.5 years. And I'm like a savage hard worker, right? Like that's just built in me. Like I'm just savage about work. And I don't mind putting in 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Like that's just how I'm wired. And to do that for years and build a life, and then within a matter of like 2 months, it's gone, like decimated, right? And to do that twice, right? Like to do that twice. And I imagine I'm not even 30 yet, right? And I've done this twice and I've been through a divorce and I've like had a kid and I've bought a house. And I've lost these things and rebuilt these things. I was so tired. I was just like, I'm so done with this. Like this whole thing, I'm done. Like I'm done, dude. Like maybe I need to sweep hallways forever. Maybe I don't know. So I got a sponsor and he's like, you're going to do the work like your life depends upon it. And you're going to develop a relationship with the God of your understanding. And that all sounded like a foreign language to me. And I really didn't believe anything that he was saying, but he seemed like he was happy and he had like nothing and he was stoked. And I had like really always tied to like, I'm only going to be happy if I have a lot of stuff. And so there was something about that just kind of like got me. He was also like my same age. He shot speedballs the same way I did. He was super smart. You know what I mean? Like, and I just saw so much of myself in this guy. I'm like, wow, dude, if this dude could be like that, like I've never been like that with like nothing and that stoked on life. And he was like a smart dude. It wasn't like that stupid stoked on life. It was like, no, this dude was like genuine, like it was real. You know what I mean? And it hit me the right way. And so I just did everything he told me to do. Right. And I'd go to the 7 a.m. meeting every day. I'd go to the noon meeting. I'd go to the night meeting. I made it AA my entire existence in life. And I was like, I'm going to do AA as well as I've worked jobs, built lives. Like I'm going to have, I had multiple coffee commitments. I had greeter commitments. I had basket passer. You name it. It was all the things, every meeting. And I went to a lot of meetings every week. I was doing some level of commitment, service. I knew everybody. I talked to everybody. I sat with every single old timer and I did my step work like that of a dying man. And during this process, I came up with this idea because I had a little bit of money from where I was working that I had to wait to get. And I came up with this idea that I was going to buy and flip houses in my area, right? So I'll find an old rundown house and just get a contractor and fix it up. And I could live there and go to my morning meeting, go to the gym, go to my night meeting, go to the sauna, and just like not live like a super low responsibility life, right? And so I found this old house in Agora Hills, which is our men's house today.
Oh, okay.
And Yeah. And it was like, this really rad house that was vacant for like 10 years. And I'm like 80 days sober, right? Like I'm
How
like
old are you at this point too?
28,
Okay. And how long ago was that?
7.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Almost a year. I was like, I think I just turned 29. Yeah. Just turned 29. And so, yeah, get this house. I move into this house. There was like the kitchen didn't work, right? Like the stove didn't work. I had a little camping stove. I had a mini fridge. I had a mattress on the floor. Like electricity didn't work in like 3/4 of the house. It was vacant for 10 years. I mean, it was a pile of shit, but it was like a really cool house. Like it was like really eclectic. So I get my 12-step instructions on day 93 and at the morning meeting. And that morning I shared and I was like, my sponsor was the first hand up right after the leader. First hand up. I shared my story, homeless, and ready and willing and able to sponsor, right? And this dude on the other side of the meeting raised his hand right after me and was like, RJ, I heard you share. Like, I want you to sponsor me. Like, please find me after the meeting. Like, and I'm like, oh my God, dude. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was so crazy that like shared right after me. And so I grabbed him and he was a homeless guy and truly like he was legit like career homeless person. And, we left, I bought him a big book. We went to CVS across the street. I bought him like, 5-subject college rule notebook, highlighter, pens, just like my sponsor did for me. And I'm like, hey, I go to the gym right now. Do you want to go? And he was like, oh yeah, like I'd love to. And he was like mid-40s. Like we did not look like we mixed. And so I take him to the gym, work him out. Right. It was an interesting little gym workout. And then I'm like, hey, I got this house. I got to go there to help my contract. You want to come with me? You can do step 1. I got to do work around the house, but you can do the reading up to page 43, highlight, write down the examples in the format that we do. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Right. He had nowhere else to go. So we go back there, I don't know, 6 hours, right? He's like working on his step 1. I'm helping the contractor and now it's time to go to the night meeting. And I'm like, hey, do you want to come to my men's meeting? And he's like, yeah, sure. So we go to a men's meeting. After the men's meeting, at that point, I would always go back to the gym and go in the sauna, right? I'm a big sauna guy. Just like, I love going in the sauna, especially before like I go to bed. It's like just a part of my routine still to this day. So he was like, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? He had nowhere else to go. So we went in the sauna. After the sauna, we went to Whole Foods, got some coconut water, and we did his whole step 1, right? So we like did the reading up to page 43. We were like out there till like 10:45 at night. And I'm going to drop him off where he was homeless. And we're heading down this road called Moore Park Road. And right where the DSS office is, like the Social Security office, where the little homeless little camp is. And we pull up and I just had this, like, it was just this moment of like, you spent all day with a dude. You got a house, that's got nobody in it. And I just like, I couldn't have him get out of the car. I like literally couldn't get him to get out of the car. And I was just like, look, dude, I don't have a mattress. And he was like, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. Right. He was like, and I'm like, all right, look, dude, it's my way or the highway. Right. Like if you're going to come with me, like I got couch cushions. They're going to go on the floor. Like we're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, prayer, meditation. We go to the 7 a.m. meeting, but we get there 45 minutes early. You're going to have to get a commitment. Like you're going to have to, and there's no phone. You can't have your phone. He had like this Obama phone, whatever he called it. And I'm like, you can't have phone, nothing, dude. Like, no, I'm not dealing with no bullshit. You know what I mean? And he was, of course, right. Like I'll do anything. So he moves in and over the next week, I got 2 more sponsees. One was my good friend who introduced me to heroin for the first time, his little brother. And then this other kid who'd been kicked out of like every place ever, who was like the impossible case, picked up him as a sponsee, and I moved both of them in with me also. So now there's like this little gang of 4 of us, and I'm like, got my sponsees, and they're like cocooned, you know what I mean? And they have to do everything I do all day long. And it was great. I loved it because like I'd run like a little sales team. Like I just like, it hit all the different little pieces of me and I'm sponsoring these dudes. And so we did everything. I mean, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week together. We ran that same routine, up at 5, 7 a.m. meeting, gym at 8:15, help the contractor, night meeting, sauna, Whole Foods, bed, like 7 days a week. And 6 months into that, I had 12 guys living there, and the house was done being remodeled. And I was at kind of the crossroads, like, am I selling this house, or am I like running a sober living? And so incorporated it, Oak Forest Recovery, and, started charging rent, like $500 a month and $1,000 a month, and, everything, like I'm paying for all their food. And I was an extreme structure guy. Like, you are doing everything I'm doing all day long. We're up at 5, 7 a.m. meeting, gym at 8:15, come back to the house, do busy work, night meeting, no phones, no cars, full lockdown, like no option. And it started to get like a local following, right? Like, I didn't know people in the treatment industry. It was like we went to 14 AA meetings a week, and it just started becoming like known as RJ's house, right? Like, it was like parents are calling me, and rehabs are calling me, and it's like rolling. And at the end of year one, I had 18 guys living there and me, and I had brought on our first guy employee, this guy named Jerry, who'd gotten sober in the 60s, who's like an old school AA legend. So it was like, me, the young, kind of newer, sober guy. And then the, juxtaposition of having the old AA legend, right? And the two of us are kind of like this team. And I lived there running that men's house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 27 months. And, I never took a day off. It was, I woke everybody up. I put them to bed. Didn't matter if I was sick. Didn't matter if I had the flu. I was just like military. You know what I mean? Like, I just did not stop. And fuck, man, it was the greatest time of my life. Greatest time. Those 27 months were the greatest time I ever had in my whole life. I look back at those memories as just the most. I was texting when I'm like, because a bunch of those guys that came through the house at that point are all, 7 years sober now, right? And I was texting with one of them because I always like going through my photo album, and I'll go like all the way back. And I just like scroll through because I like to relive. And I've always documented. Like, I take pictures of all sorts of shit, like random shit, little videos, and just like, and I was like reliving it. And there was like a couple of these, I just started sending like photos to like all the OGs.
I do that too.
You know what I mean?
I do that too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I had this realization. This was just yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. And I was just like, man, dude, like, we're all still sober, man. Like, we're all in there, and we're not just all sober, like, we're crushing it. You know what I mean? And like, we're all crushing it in different ways in our lives, and our lives are fucking huge and big and beautiful. And like, some of them have like families and kids and careers. And it's like, we got all in, you know what I mean? We were just like, and I think, the opposite of addiction is connection. And there was so much brotherhood and connection in that first 27 months. And, the connection today is like just wildly even better. But back then, living there with all these dudes, in it with them, leading from a place of do as I do, it just was such magic, And at 27 months, I actually had to be like interventioned by like, my sponsor and other dudes. Like, you need to move out, dude. You're like, it's been 27 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And they had to pry me out of there. Like, I mean, like clawing at the earth. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was clawing at the earth. And I got this condo, and I remember I got this condo, and I furnished my bedroom, and I would only, in the beginning, I like to get them off my back. I got this condo. Well, no, I would sleep there one night out of the week, and I'd sleep the other 6 at the house.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I like literally, I couldn't leave. You know what I mean? But not because like, I just loved it. You know what I mean? Like,
No, I get it. That's how I felt about my studio. You had to pry it out of my cold, dead hands. I started there when I first got sober. It's why I'm alive. The connection with those people. I totally understand. But it can become too codependent.
For
obviously.
sure.
Yeah.
It was like, it was just time for me to, it was time to evolve. It was like, I needed to go to the next phase. So then I finally, I start sleeping totally at, the condo, but, waking up at 4:30 in the morning and then going to the house. Right. And then being there all day until like I was going to sleep. And that's when we opened up our women's house. And because I was getting lots of phone calls, and I was like, I want to do this, and found the staff and opened up our women's house in Westlake. And then at the same time, a dude that helped me get sober, he was one of the people that kind of like intervention me and made me like, get the condo. I reversed on him and was like, he was working a job he hated, right? And he interventioned me to get me out of that house. And him and I go on this little trip. And he tells me his whole life story, and he's working this job he just hates. It's like murdering his soul. And so then I'm like, hey, dude, he was like, he graduated from Cornell. He's like done full length feature films, 2,500 television commercials, and he'd been sober for, like 7 years or something at that point, and was like really miserable with his like career life, working a sales job, selling, credit card processing stuff. Like it was just soul crushing sort of work. And so I wrote a business plan that was like, what if in the business plan was to create a full service digital marketing agency with a heart in video, so a media company, along with full service digital marketing, and with him at the center as the creative director. And he thought I was like totally crazy, I think. And I said, I was like, I'll guarantee your salary. I'll make sure that no matter what, if you leave the company you're currently at and you come with me and do this, I will make sure that you continue getting paid the same amount you've been getting paid until we make it. And he quit, took a leap of faith, started this media company in my condo living room while running the men's house, while growing the women's house. And the digital marketing agency just starts to take off. And we start doing full service digital marketing for all sorts of doctors, like implant surgeons, dentists, orthodontists, people that are like leaders in the airway movement, which is like this whole little niche medical thing, myofunctional therapists. And we become like the experts of this field. And so then, now I'm doing all three things, right? I'm like, got this media company growing. I got this women's house starting. I got the men's house, which is like firmly just legendary, right? And year three, I had been using a lot of outside therapists and clinicians to help our clients. And I was like really just running into a lot of roadblocks because I had different beliefs ideologically on how we should, because I feel like a lot of people will treat like mental health as a separate issue, addiction as a separate issue, or the therapist is in conflict with the sponsor or the 12-step principles. And it creates all this room for excuses and splitting and just, people not being on the same page, and really frustrated me. So I'm like, you know what? I want to build my own clinical team because I want to make sure that everybody we're all on the same page and we're all ideologically aligned, right? And because I think that the journey of the recovering addict really requires that, because we can't, like I said,
Agreed.
there's that schizophrenic part of us, right?
Yeah,
where it's like, no, I really want to get sober and I truly mean it. Yet while I'm getting sober and building the strategy of that, I will build in trapdoors and I can't stop myself. Right.
Totally.
And
absolutely.
So how do I eliminate the trapdoors? And so I set out to build this clinical team and found a lot of really, really incredible clinicians that are all 12 steps sober, and launched our PA that is tightly integrated with the 12-step process.
Okay.
Right.
That's so cool. I love that.
Oh, it's rad, right? Like it's super rad. Everyone there is 12 steps sober. They're all part of this local 12-step community. And I've known most of them for many, many years. Bunch of friends all getting together. And some of these people are like, 30, 40 years sober, 20 years sober, 12, 15 years sober, all coming together. And then we opened up our compound, which has a men's and a women's house on one property. So now there's 4 houses, 2 women's, 2 men's. And we built this clinical curriculum that is tightly integrated with all the stuff that we're doing at the houses, right? So every single piece is all in alignment. And, now that's all been open now for 4 years. The whole system's been open for 7.5 years. And it's like, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I've gone and toured so many places and we are so tightly integrated. There's nobody ever not on the same page. Right. And we are so in alignment with what we're doing on the 12-step community side of things and what we're doing on the clinical side of things, and individually, group, and we have a massive family program. All of that is like through the lens of 12-step recovery, right?
Dude, I love that because, like you just said, so often therapists' ideology are in conflict with 12 step. And the problem with addicts is we will take advantage of that. It does create room. And like when my husband was in rehab, Vivitrol works for him. Suboxone doesn't. Okay. He was on Suboxone since he was 19. He stores it up and does too much and does Adderall because it's too much. And then he ends up using anyways and he sells it. Doesn't work for him. And I told them that when he got there. And after like 2 weeks, he was still on Suboxone. And I got on the phone with his clinician and she said, well, that's what he wants. Skylar wants to stay on Suboxone. And I was like, of course he wants. Why are we asking him what he wants? He has 2 weeks. He was just homeless and missing in Tijuana. He is not in a good place. You know what I mean? And like, but the philosophy of therapy is, and again, you know, for the record, my audience has heard me say this a lot. I'm totally okay with Suboxone if that works for you. It doesn't work for him. And I said to her, I was like, I'm just amazed that there's a clinical medical team that I told you what works and what doesn't, and you are going with the one that doesn't. I'm just really disappointed.
There's just, yeah.
And she said she wouldn't take my phone calls after that. She was like, well, you know, because they were supposed to do like family appointments and she wouldn't after that. And so anyways, I love that you tried to find something that did integrate like the reality of addiction and addicts and how manipulative we can be with a compassionate environment that is based on evidence, right? Aligning the two.
Correct. And, you know, I think there's, I mean, I can get on my soapbox about all of these things, but, you know, I have compassion for the therapist that you talked about, right? Like I know the scenario so well, right? And the reason why I have so much compassion, right, is because addiction treatment, it exists in a place that is almost like an artist painting on a canvas, right? And so, you know, and I've gone and toured so many different places, and every single place, right, it's one of the fields that I think exists because recovery is so, it's so interesting because it's very hard to define, right? And you'd think it wouldn't be, but it is. It's really hard to define. And those of us who are like firmly in dogmatic 12-step recovery have a certain definition, right? But to the general world, right? To normie clinicians who like got into this field because they have a bleeding heart or because they thought it was going to be good money or because, and then you've got operators and owners who could either be getting into it because they're like, oh, it's a good business model, or you got somebody that gets into it because they just love addiction field, but they themselves know nothing about it, right? Or you got somebody who's sober, who just really is not considering the entire equation, right? And the thing is it's so fungible. It's so truly like really kind of undefined, which creates such a open canvas for people to create these different things. And, you know, because you've been to so many different places and every place kind of has its own little different niche flavor, whatever. And, you know, if you make widgets, right, there's like one way to make a widget. You know what I mean? It's like, it's either a good widget or it's not a good widget, you know? And in recovery, it's so not that. And so I have so much compassion because a lot of these people just, they don't have good leadership. They don't have good direction.
Right. No,
they
you're
don't
right,
have
right.
good
You're right.
principles. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because that, and I don't know the scenario, but I've seen so many hundreds.
Yeah. And if your background as a physician is do no harm, then you got this guy, my husband's good looking, charming, smart, saying she's mad at me. I'm going to do fentanyl and die. Can I just stay on this?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, I get it.
See, this is where you've got medical field, which is like you break an arm, they have very clear process. They are trained in the medical field with very clear process. And then you have addiction treatment. And these two areas are interwoven. And you've got medical field which is very firm, rigid protocol procedure. And then you have addiction recovery, which is like artistic and feeling and morphing, like just so creative in its process, right?
I love that it's like art, like it's like a canvas.
It is. It is. I truly believe that the process of recovery or the process of creating an addiction treatment center is an artistic process. And because that's the only way it can be done, right? It's the only way it can be done. And it's like, yeah, really good operators, I feel like the ones I've met are really, really creative, artistic people who have a really solid foundation in like being organized, like from that medical standpoint, and then also can blend in that really high level sort of creative process where the two interweave really well together. And that takes such a high level of consideration. The problem too is like you don't get paid for that extra work, right? It's a free market. It's a capitalistic world, right? There's so much I think that in a treatment center you have to do in order to be really, really good and effective that you can't bill for, you don't get paid for, right? It exists in an area that like you just have to really, really, care about really painting an incredible canvas, right? And so I have compassion, right? I have compassion. It's so hard. Yeah, it's just really, really difficult. And then you're treating individuals that, in a lot of cases are like, fuck you, I don't want this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they want it, but
they're not
they want
ready.
it, or they're ready, but they want it their way.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
of course,
no, I want to get sober, but the trap door that I'm building is like, I needs to be my way of sober.
Totally.
Right? Which is like, that's the,
Yeah.
So.
There was this guy, the man I learned the most from in recovery, he owned my sober living or he was like the manager there. And when your dad let you get high at the house for a few days, this guy, I was strung out and I needed to either go to the methadone clinic or get well, but I needed to get well. And then the next day he was going to start detoxing me and I didn't have any money. And so I was going to go to Walmart and steal something or something. And he asked me, he was like, I was like, well, he was like, I need you to stay in the house right now. And I was like, Steve, I can't. I will stay here tomorrow. I promise you. But right now I have to leave. And he said, why? And he was a crack addict. He hadn't been a heroin addict. And I said, I have to get opiate, I have to get some heroin. And he said, how are you going to do that? And I said, I'm going to do a crime of some sort. Like, I don't know. And he was like, okay. And I watched him debate giving me money. So I didn't have to do that, even though he was a sober living house manager.
Yeah.
And he actually, in the moment, he literally went to get his wallet and then someone called him and he answered the phone and he was on the phone for so long, I left. But I think he was going to give me, and I went back, I did go back, but like in that moment, that is somebody taking artistic license with me in that moment, because that was what would have worked for me, but maybe not someone else. And again, he ended up not doing it. So, whatever.
Yeah, totally. But like, again, that's what it is, right? That the whole thing exists in like a really, here's the thing though. It's like, I love going to see like orchestras. And I'll go down to like the Disney concert hall and I've watched a bunch and I think the reason I like it is like it's organized chaos. And when done well, it just produces the most amazing sound, right? And I feel like addiction treatment, the business, the industry is like having little independent orchestras or symphonies. And it's like all of it, it's just organized chaos and it needs to just play right. And when it plays right, man, it just is like, wow, that's beautiful. But here's the thing also is like in addiction treatment, when you make a widget, you figure it out. And I sold machinery, my first life to big automated production companies. It's like once you had all your processes in order, the product came out well. You figured it out one time. You figured it out once. And the product always came out good after you figured it out. But addiction treatment is like you're showing up and doing a new performance all the time, right? And so that whole orchestra, right, has got to be, it's like a sports team or something. It's like you're the head of what is like a real high capacity sports team. And that sports team's got to be operating to show up to execute on that symphony so that it comes out well. And I think that's the responsibility that, if you talk to a treatment center owner who's super aware, you know what I mean? Like somebody who's emotionally in tune, I think they would describe that in the same way, right? Because you're putting on a symphony and you gotta pay attention to all the different instruments and it's all gotta play well and it's gotta keep playing. And so you can get, the whole thing can be off, one night, right? And the conductor's not up there doing the thing right. And I think that that's where this whole thing exists, and it's so undefinable. And I have a lot of empathy. Most people are like, oh, I hate the insurance companies. I hate insurance companies. They're a pain in the ass, right? Like such a pain. But I understand why they are. Because how do you define that process?
Right. Yeah.
How do you define it? They talk about this in the big book, right? Like they talk about it in the doctor's opinion. They talk, he worked with alcoholic insanity, for his whole career, and was just like, got me. You know what I mean? Like, got me. And then this dude, Bill, comes along and he's like, hey, man, I was an ex-stockbroker. I'm just going to come and show up and talk to people about God. You know what I mean? And dude's
that's
like,
what works. Yeah.
Cool. You know what I mean? Like, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's really what happened. It wasn't like he went there and had some idea. This dude had toiled, right, in alcoholic insanity for decades, right? And at the end of that, sat there and was like, listen, I'm one of the preeminent, people of this field and have been doing this forever. And I have no clue. Like, I have not made an impression on the problem, even the tiniest dent. And it's been my life's work. And then this guy, Bill, shows up. And imagine this dude's so like at the end of his wits that he's just like, yeah, sure, man. Like, whatever. Like, yeah, go ahead. And Bill shows up and like all of a sudden, like some people start staying sober. And then Bill comes back later and the dude's just like, wait, what? Like, and so he's like, yeah, deeply profound spiritual experience. Like, I guess deeply profound spiritual experience. And if you have one of those, and he says in there, he's like, these guys seem like they know what they're doing and they're staying sober. So like, maybe you should do that.
Yeah.
Because what we're going to do here is like electroshock therapy and belladonna treatment. And like, we're going to mess you up.
But that's such a beautiful thing that's what it requires. And that's why I think there won't ever be, like, sometimes I'll hear people lament the idea that there isn't going to be just a pill for addiction. But I think that's why there won't ever be, because there's a human side of growth that happens to addicts, which is why I feel so lucky to be one, that we get to have that experience. And it's like the beautiful side of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just the human experience, whether you're a drug addict or not, in my opinion, this is just how I see the world, in my opinion or not, is a creative process, right? I think that, living is an act of creation, right? Going through life, right, is a creative process. And I mean that in the sense that, like, we wake up every morning and we make decisions every day. That is painting the canvas of our own life, right? And so living in itself is a creative process. Healing in itself has to be a creative process, right? Recovery, I think more so than almost anything else, is an extremely creative process, because we're dealing with people. At least for me, I am extra sensitive, right? I am extra feeling oriented, right? I am extra fearful, right? Like, I am just that's why I'm like, forever, I was not just special, I was special. In a sense, I think we are, like, I think all drug addicts and alcoholics are, because we just seem to feel like things, and we have a really poor reaction to the way we feel things too intensely. That is a creative process, and it requires that in order to find healing, in order to create connection, in order to create all of these things. It's got to be
Great. I don't know. That's my thing.
No,
I
I
think
love
that,
that. That's a beautiful sentiment. I love that.
yeah, because AA or 12 step community, right? It's messy. What are like, the creative process is messy, right? Any artist, you know what I mean? I feel like I get that idea in my head, like that imagery of the artist who's like been locked away and creates this masterpiece you see and you're like, holy shit, how did he do that? And then you look at him and there's just paint all over him and he's just like a mess. You know what I mean? Like hair, there's paint in the hair. There's like, you know what I mean? But there's this masterpiece. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's the creative process. It's just messy. Community is messy. Recovery is messy. There has to be an allowance and a room for that. And the medical field struggles with that.
I
Right?
fucking
And so,
love that. That's so beautiful how you just said that. And you're right. It's beyond recovery because that's how I was with my studio. It was like I painted it with my soul, right? Like I would stand in the lobby and it was yellow and there was a phoenix and it was like I had painted it with my soul. And it was messy and the dynamics with the women sometimes were intense and it ended in this really intense way, unfortunately. But like, it's everything you just described. It's like, that's the creative part of life. You know what I mean? And these things that we get to make. And there does need to be room for messy. You're right. You're right. That's true. And AA and the community of 12 step is really fucking messy. People are having kids with other people and then they get married and then they get divorced and then somebody fucking, you know what I mean? Like your local NA group is insane. You know what I mean? Like it's incestuous and people used to be married. Now they're not. Like, now you're married to your friend.
And it's like, but also I've like, you go be a part of any church group.
Exactly.
I mean, you go be a part of,
dude, Little League,
anywhere,
PTO,
man, anywhere. I just am like,
anywhere. You're right.
I think you go AA, NA, whatever. We might be a little bit more like loud and we might be a little bit more like edgy.
But it's the same
and how that
as
all
a church group.
But it's the same.
Of course.
And it's the same. It's just, it's anywhere and everywhere. We're humans and we're just flawed creators. You know what I mean? And we're just in a state of creating just all the time. And it's really just, for me at least, in my own thing, it's like, okay, I'm a creator. I know that. That's where my like divine power lives. So how do I remove as much fear as possible so that I can create at a better level? Right. Like, and so like, and then I think that's what 12 step is too, right? Like everything I did in the 12 step work and sponsorship and everybody that I sponsor, it's like, I get a phone call and somebody's, whatever, freaked out, angry, upset. What is the end of a 10 step, right? You do a 10 step with somebody and it ends always after we uncover and blah, 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 selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking. And then we're like, okay, what's the fear? You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah. Wait. I'm not good enough.
Okay.
I'm going to be alone.
Yes. Okay. So last question, because I've been talking to you for hours, but I really want to know what your process on this is, because I really love what you just said. Your divine power lies in your creativity. Me too. But and then your job is to figure out how to get past the fear. Fear runs everything that I do. Fear of what people will think if I post something, whatever, like all that. So what are your processes? You mentioned the sauna, and I'm sure that's going to be part of it. What does a daily process look like for you that is you caretaking your creative spirit so that you don't feel fear? Like what's your meditation practice, your spiritual practice? How do you tend to you?
Yeah, it's evolved so much. It's a great question. And I've had different insecurities about it. I've always been very insecure about that process to a certain degree, because in the beginning I was very rigid, right? Like in the story you heard in the early days, I was like the most rigid person, right? It was like I had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I had to have my apple cider vinegar water. I had to have my coffee. I had to have my granola. I had to listen to these Tibetan monk chants. I had to like do my readings. I had to pray. I was so extremely rigid, and that worked. That worked for 2-3 years. Like it worked wonders for me as a very scared person. Right. And then I feel like that, as I sponsored a lot of people in that process and I stayed extremely rigid and I stayed super diligent on that practice, it removed a lot of fear over years. Right. And I became a much more sort of softer, more open person. Right. And then I feel like over the last, let's just say 5 years, right, that in itself has been like a very different creative process. I do different things almost every week now. It's different. There's a lot of things where I am like, if there's something I'm scared of or I don't want to do, I do. Right? Like I just have this like, I lean into it. Like I find the areas that I don't like and I just push in that area and I push and push and push and push and push until I've gone all the way through. I think a lot of that comes from, my prayer life, right? I have a really strong connection of a God of my understanding that's been cultivated and developed over many, many years. I sponsor, right? So I'm in the constant help of other people and seeing people much newer in the fear process and being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Yeah. Like leaning into fear. It's like a constant reminder. It's like living proof in front of me. And then, like this last week, like I had a men's step group that I always go to Wednesday night, right? That's one of my anchors. I've been doing that for like so long, like I just never miss. And I'll create different little ecosystems, right? So like I'm always looking to create like a new ecosystem. I think the only way to conquer fear is generally through the conduits of other people, right? So like this Wednesday night group, I don't know, a year ago, it goes from 6 to 7:30 at night. And at 7:30, I take a whole bunch of us over to the gym and we go together, right? And in the beginning, it was just me and two guys like a year ago. Last night, there's so many guys in the sauna, we can't like all fit in the sauna. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, I feel like so much of like getting out of fear for me is like I'm building these little things and like seeding them and watching them grow. And it's, this Wednesday, I actually didn't go to the step group that they all went to. I went to a new men's meeting that's really small and intimate that I've heard about for years. And I think I'm now going to start going there on Wednesdays, leaving that other ecosystem. And it's like, I find my new little ecosystems, new other people. I like lean into fear, right? I really like challenge today. When things are not going my way, I lean into it, right? I'm just like,
so learning through other people and setting up systems with other people in the area that
I feel like I always need my anchors, if that makes sense. Like I need my anchors. Now in recovery as people
or as things?
Yeah,
that you
all
deal
things,
with?
things.
Okay.
Like I need all my anchor points because that's where my grounding is, right? Like, like I get up at the same time today, right? Which is not 5 a.m. It's a little later today.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then I'm at the gym every morning at 8 and I've got my guys that I meet there every morning at 8, right? I do that. And then I go to the office and I meet with all the different people and then different nights of the week, like Wednesday night, I have my men's thing I do. We go to the sauna, which I'm now like altering a little bit to get a new flavor there. Thursday's the bonfire meeting, which is the Oak Forest, like 200 people show up. We cater it with food, live music. And like, that's where I do like I go there Thursdays. I make sure everything's like on point. It's like where I get a lot of like, I care about it a lot. I really look forward to it. And then during the weekend, it's like my regenerate, right? Like, I'm going to go to sauna, cold plunge. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to make sure that one of those days has no time limits, right? Where I'm like, there's not things I have to be at or things I have to do. It's like, if I want to sleep in, I'm going to sleep in. If I want to, go to the gym or not go to the gym, or I want to run on my own schedule, I have 1 or 2 of those days a week where I'm like extremely not rigid. So, and that's what I mean by anchors, right? It's like, these are my anchors through my system, through my weekly life. And I just do them no matter what. Like, it's just not an option. It's just what I do.
Well, damn, dude. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to sit down and talk. So I'll put all of this in the show notes too, but where can everybody connect with you and find all of your businesses?
If you go to my Instagram, all the businesses are linked there. You can find my podcast that I co-host with Rachel and Hunter at Against All Odds. And yeah, Instagram is, I think it's RJELIZ. Find me on,
something like that. I'll put it in, I'll have it linked too. So people can, and then from there, Oak Forest is there. Against All Odds.
All
is
links,
there.
all links to all the things.
So,
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I feel like I learned from you too.
It was great. I mean, I always love jumping on, I can tell this. I've told my story so many times, that, and it's funny because every time I tell it too, there's like different little new things that come out, and I'm like, oh yeah.
I know. I forget things. Yeah, I forget things too. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.